I've noticed a lot of things seeing the interaction between parents and their autistic children. Some of it is particularly bothersome to me for a number of reasons, which I will try to explain here. I want to make it very clear, I'm not trying to attack anyone or tell parents how they should do what is an already incredibly difficult job, made even harder by having your child be on the spectrum. I simply want to point out the observations I've had, so hopefully it helps people see how these behaviors might be harmful in the long run. Number 1, talking about their child as if they are not in the room when they are. I've noticed that sometimes parents of autistic people will do this, especially if that person is nonverbal. The incorrect assumption that people in general make is that an autistic person who is nonverbal is in their own world and is not aware of what is happening around them. Sometimes this is the case, but it's not always the truth. With the recent innovations in technology, which facilitate communication through non-traditional means utilizing tablets with software written specifically for this purpose, it has become more and more clear that just because a person is nonverbal does not mean they are not aware of what is happening around them. Autism advocates like Tracy Thresher and Larry Bissonette are just 2 examples of nonverbal autistic adults with rich, actively aware minds that are connected, but there are many more to be found. The fact is, wherever a person is on the spectrum, whether they are aware of what is happening around them or not, they deserve to be treated with respect. It is normally considered rude by people not on the spectrum, in society in general, to talk about someone in front of them as if they weren't there, whether they understand you or not, and autistic people deserve that same consideration. Number 2, having too low of expectations. Autism and its comorbid conditions can produce some very severe behavior and difficulties. It is natural for parents to be concerned with their child's future when the mere thought of it seems so bleak. During difficult times in life, it's natural to feel as if the hard times will never end. When it comes to autistic people, however, time can often make a world of difference. Some autistic people will always have the severe difficulties and struggle to function, while others will make small gains in areas of difficulty, and some will even make relatively large gains. Every person has their own path in life, and it is healthier psychologically to accept that and to try to help them along without shoving them and causing them to trip and fall. Try to find things your child enjoys and is good at, and if they develop those skills, that's great. If not, they should be okay with you too. In my view, the optimal balance is to make options available without pushing your own bias. Right now, it might feel like the best you'll ever do is to get your child to function at a basic level, but try not to let that make you lose all hope in them forever. Number 3, having too high of expectations. The other side of this is that it's important to have a balanced and fair expectation of your autistic child. When I say balance, I mean that you should recognize that the functionality of your child on their best day is not representative of how they should be able to function on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes people have the misconception that because an autistic person was able to do something at one point in their life that they can always do that, and they simply choose not to. In truth, sometimes things just go really well for people on and off the spectrum. Everyone has their good and bad days, but for people on the spectrum, it generally takes a lot less to make a bad day. This is common with any difficulty in life that someone has to deal with on a daily basis, whether that be disease or chronic pain or a number of disorders. Being on the spectrum can be frustrated, draining, and for some downright infuriating. That's why it's important to balance your hopes and wants against what your child is able to deal with and handle in an emotionally and psychologically healthy manner. When I say have a fair expectation of your autistic child, I mean that you shouldn't expect more out of them than you do yourself or others not on the spectrum. They're going to have their bad days just like everyone else, so try to be a little bit patient with them when they do. Stimming is a coping mechanism for dealing with stress. I don't know anyone who would try to stop a person from counting to 10 in order to keep from blowing up in anger, but it's still somehow seen as acceptable to try to stop autistic people from stimming. I get that some of the behavior might look weird or it might be awkward in public, but if it makes them feel better, then ultimately isn't that way more important than what some stranger thinks about it? Number 4, presenting yourself as a victim. Look, raising kids is hard, and if your child is autistic, then it gets much harder. The sacrifices and the struggles of parents of autistic children are often substantial, and their efforts should always be recognized. It is important to remember, though, that you don't have the experience that your child has. If I asked you if you would rather be the parent of an autistic child or be autistic yourself, which would you choose? However difficult things are, it's always important to consider that it might be more difficult for someone else, and to remember that Dwelling on how hard life is just doesn't make it any easier. Number 5, forcing your child to pretend to be anyone other than who they are. I understand very well the desire to blend in with others for people on the spectrum. When you're different, people recognize it. You recognize it, and it causes problems. It's normal to want to seem like everyone else. And the same goes for parents raising kids on the spectrum. All of us who went to school know that kids can be very mean, and so it's understandable to try to protect your child by teaching them to blend in with their peers. The problem with blending in is that it can often exacerbate already existing issues, especially with anxiety. In my opinion, it's great to provide autistic people with these tools, but to not always expect them to be able to utilize them. Every person should be able to do what comes natural to them without being harassed, as long as what they're doing isn't hurting or negatively affecting others. For example, when it comes to eye contact, I used to force myself to make a lot of it. In working through difficulties that I would later find out were associated with my ASD, I read about techniques in using eye contact, and I started to force myself to maintain it. Unfortunately, because it didn't come naturally to me, I started making too much eye contact, and that also made people uncomfortable. Since being diagnosed, I've gone back to making very little eye contact. The simple fact is that if I make eye contact with you, it makes me feel anxious. Then I wonder if I'm making too much eye contact or too little, which makes me more anxious. And if I'm focused on thinking about whether I'm being awkward, then I'm definitely not listening to what you're saying, because I just can't focus on two things at once. Thus, you can see why I would rather stare at the wall and make intermittent eye contact with you and be able to listen to you than to try to make eye contact and then not listen to anything that you're saying. So I hope that those provided a little bit of insight, and thank you very much for watching. Thanks for coming by, and have a good day. Hey everybody, Ultimate Oddball here. If you want to stay up to date with my videos, click subscribe. I release a new video on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do gaming commentary and review. I talk about my experiences on the autism spectrum, and I share my opinions and thoughts on a variety of matters. My hope is that, through my videos, I can help to dispel some of the misinformation, confusion, and negativity people have regarding autism. Thank you for helping me do that by watching these videos.